Hello everybody, welcome to round number 4 of the Altibox Norway Chess Super Tournament 2017. We have, as always, a bunch of exciting matchups, and we have Peter Svidler here to tell us all the gossip behind the scenes.
Milking. All the gossip is about milking, I think, these days. So my Twitter feed this morning was full of videos of people milking cows, and I kind of wish I was there.
This got weird fast. What are we talking about? The rest day they had some photo shoot, or what
There
did
was
they do?
apparently no, it wasn't the photo shoot. Apparently they had a proper farming triathlon which included milking cows. So all of them tried their hand at actual cow milking,
Okay.
and that must have been a very interesting experience, I think, for most of the field.
That sounds slightly disturbing. Let's have a look at the standings and pairings and then talk about their respective cow milking skills while we go through today's pairings. Fabiano Caruana with the white pieces against Vladimir Kramnik. I believe a draw is a favorite in this game, as in every other game, and I believe Kramnik is better at milking cows than Caruana.
That would be my general impression about all of the things you mentioned in that sentence. Yeah, you kind of spoiled it for all of us by confidently predicting a round of 5 draws again, and it's very difficult to go against that prediction. If you start doing that, why am I here? It was my job to boringly say every single game in this tournament looks like a draw on paper before it starts. And you've gone and usurped that, the one reliable function I had.
No, you're here for the chess analysis.
Okay.
And for predictions, Aronian Carlsen.
Should be a draw.
Who's better at milking cows?
I'll take Magnus. I've actually seen some footage of Magnus milking a cow yesterday. He looked very, very efficient.
He's very outdoorsy, isn't he? Like many Norwegians are, because they are willfully ignorant of their horrible climate, and they seem to make it a virtue. Let's have a bunch of winter sports and spend all day outdoors in minus 20 degrees.
Well, as someone who has met minus 20 degrees in my life previously, I don't entirely disagree with this approach. I mean, if you play the hand you're dealt, so why not try to make the most of it? Winter sports.
Well, in my book, making the most of it is staying inside where it's warm. But
Well, yeah, but you get cooped up and lack of sunlight and blah blah. I could give you a small lecture on the subject of mankind's somewhat absurd decision to live in these latitudes. But I probably shouldn't.
let's wait with that. While we are predicting Nakamura versus MVL, could be your favorite opening, the Najdorf.
Yeah, I'm out of the 5 games I see on the screen there. That's the one that, once again, on paper looks like the most promising, because both of them have been. I think even their games against each other. I think it's a.
This is the chat. Sorry, back to the non-chat.
Yeah, I think starting from maybe last year's Stavanger, there are certain tabias in the Najdorf which a few of the people playing in this tournament are sort of discussing with both colors, and including very much Hikaru and MVL, and I think Giri and Caruana occasionally decide to join in. So something very interesting in Bishop G5 E6 Najdorf is not out of the question in that game, or it could be something else altogether. We'll see. But yeah, that's the one that looks the least like a draw on paper, I think.
Yeah, when I was making my expert 5 draws prediction, I thought about predicting something else in this one. This was the most tempting. Then again, Maxim is my boy. I'm not gonna say 1-0 because he's too good in the Najdorf, and Hikaru is too good of a chess player.
Yeah,
to predict a 0-1.
Yeah,
so what are you gonna do?
predicting a black victory before the game starts is not something you generally do in these fields. Although we've already seen one game won by black already. So.
All right, we have Anish Giri versus Vishy Anand. Anish has beat Vishy with white in the past, surprised him in some English. But nowadays, he struggles to win games, and it would be foolish of me not to predict a draw on this one.
Yeah, that seems like a safe bet. There will be. We might learn something about opening theory. That is very possible in this game. Anish, as you keep on mentioning, and I don't disagree. I don't know if I would rate him as an outright number one right now, but he is of the younger generation, I guess, the most booked up and the most diligent in working on opening theory. And Vishy is a giant in all respects, and it is very possible they'll teach us something about I mean, I wouldn't dare predict an opening. I think both of them can make more or less any move. But yeah, an even looking game.
I'll predict, I don't know. I really don't know. 1d4 and then something. Wesley So versus Sergei Kayakin. Wesley beat Kayakin in, where was it, Shamkir, where they played recently? Where Wesley won, I believe, against Kramnik and Kayakin back to back. But gotta play it safe as well. Predicting a draw on this one too.
Yeah, Sergei is not having his usual stellar tournament so far. I mean, he has won all the Norway chess tournaments he played in, as we mentioned previously on these shows. But he is extremely solid and already faced some very tough challenges with Black in this tournament and passed them, if not entirely with flying colors, but at least he got out of it alive, which is the important bit.
It's a flattering way to say he has 3 draws, but yeah, I don't. I'm never surprised if Kayakin does well. Not always a fan of his chess style, but the results tend to speak for himself. He has fantastic nerves, feels very comfortable in Norway. Do you think that he's as motivated as the rest of the field in a non-World Cup, non-candidates, non-World Championship match event?
Well, he did win 2 of these, and he has tournament victories to his name prior to that. But I have seen suggestions, or perhaps seen is the wrong word, because I suspect suggestions that he is keeping his powder extremely dry until the next candidates, for which he qualified by virtue of having played a title match.
Right.
And even his opening choices, I think, I've seen some people suggest that he really is extremely cautious in terms of even showing some of the previous preparation, let alone something he might be cooking up for 2018.
I keep hearing about the preparation, like it wasn't shown in the match, it's not going to be shown after the match, like when it's all going to be unleashed on Peter Svidler and the candidates. Sure, you make it there. I'm aware. You have to qualify first.
I don't know, but in Shamkir he was sort of notably not playing much of what you would consider his absolute mainline repertoire. He has shown a few things here.
Against Vishy, he tried.
Yeah.
This rookie 1 Berlin, he had some sharp ideas.
Yeah. So some of it is making an appearance occasionally, but in general, I'm not sure I buy into this theory wholeheartedly, but it's not impossible that he actually has his mind very set on trying to repeat his performance of 2016 to qualify again for the match against Magnus. And if that is his sole focus, you could maybe understand why he's not showing us any bombshells.
But isn't that dangerous? To use a basketball analogy, which I'm sure you're happy. If you don't play defense all season, like the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then you're playing at the highest stage, which is the candidates, is it going to be so easy to have an on-off switch and all of a sudden play excellent chess if you don't really try? I'm not even talking about Kayakin, I'm talking about the approach beforehand.
I think that would be difficult, but there is a difference between not trying to play your best chess and not showing any of your opening stuff. I don't think he is necessarily playing it. I haven't seen any particular relaxed approach in terms of how he treats positions he gets. But I mean, to my mind, spending a whole year playing openings you're not intending to play on the biggest stage is weird. It's a bit too long. I can understand not.
You also get no reps in your real openings because there might be problems you're not aware of and so on. I'm also not sure. if you can really avoid everything, like you will play the Berlin with black, and there
Yeah.
you don't have like a B line and an A line normally.
Yeah, no, it's not really very feasible in particular with black, as you mentioned, because that would require sort of a complete switch from him. He would need to start playing something else altogether in order not to show anything at all. With white, you have obviously a lot more leeway. You can start, I don't know, playing knight of 3 in every second game or whatever it is. But yeah, then again, it was just a theory proposed to me by some people, but
Right.
I'm not sure if I necessarily subscribe to it.
All right, then of course we have Magnus Carlsen with black against Levon Aronian. Levon did defeat Magnus in last year's Norway chess, which Magnus won quite convincingly, but he lost a bit of a strange game with black against Levon, where he got crushed in some knight of 3, d5, c4, c6, g3 sort of situation.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the details, but yeah, that game left a weird impression.
He played your strange line, this d takes c4, b takes c4, c5 kind of thing.
Oh yeah, and then started doing something weird.
Yep.
Yeah, he was kind of lost by move 15, which you don't normally see very much from him.
Yeah, and I doubt this is going to happen again, but Magnus
No.
has talked about this, and we've seen it in many games. Levon is capable of outplaying Magnus. He's not, well, he's capable, but not always able to finish the job. He's had many good positions, but he went on to lose even some of these good positions. We shall find out what happens today. And we have liftoff. Levon Aronian played 1 d4, no surprises there. We'll see what Magnus has in store. He plays a bunch of things. We've seen him play the Grunfeld, we've seen him play Nimzo, Queen's Gambits, we've seen him play some Slavs. Not clear what he's going to opt for against Levon.
Yeah.
What do you think? Which opening? Last chance to predict before he touches. Too late, d5 is a big tip-off already.
Yeah, sorry. I was very happy to see the Najdorf in Nakamura MVL, and I was I only had eyes for that little diagram on our screen.
And Magnus confident that d4, d5 put Levon out of book, left the board immediately, but Levon blitzed out. The move 2c4, interesting, offering a pawn sacrifice on the second move. But if you take it, Levon has already shown in this tournament that he's prepared to play the move e3, which more or less ensures that you win your pawn back. Because after e3, if black were to try to keep this, b5, you go a4, undermine this construction, and c6.
So you're willing to take this all the way, aren't you?
What? This is not everybody's a super grandmaster. This is useful information for quite a lot of viewers that you can't keep the pawn because here your rook gets trapped. If you don't have this tactic in these positions, you often have b3, undermining this construction, which also wins your pawn back. But none of this is very likely to happen. Magnus, more often than not, will fortify this pawn in the center in this position.
Magnus generally plays, I think, the Slav or occasionally some Queen's Gambit. Seen him play much, Queen's Gambit accepted.
No.
In Caruana Kramnik, as someone already pointed out in chat, they are repeating, well, a few games, including one of mine. I won a reasonably nice game against Ernesto Inakiev in last year's super final in this line. Slightly surprised that Vladimir went for this. Not because the line is bad, but because I thought there are more advantageous ways of going for the immediate d5 in the anti-Berlin. But of course, not gonna give advice to Kramnik about how to play the anti-Berlin. That's absurd.
I'm a bit curious. I don't think there's necessarily a reason, but it looked to me like white was more or less stuck in this line. They were playing for a bit, but then they stopped playing this. And everybody, it feels like, switched to this immediate d5. One point being 95 castles gives black big initiative. Why is that?
I think we also had this discussion a little bit when we were discussing the modern trends in what's happening in the gioco piano. I think people just grew bored defending these slightly worse positions, even if they are objectively very, very close to complete equality. And they are now aiming to sort of mathematically equalize outright against both the gioco piano and the d3, c3 anti-Berlin.
By pushing their pawn to d5.
Yeah, by playing d5 in one tempo and kind of settling the question there and then.
Knight bd2, of course, is a legal move here, but white hasn't shown much. So this is the discussion.
Yeah, but in this position, I don't believe I played bishop g5 here. I think I went with before knight bd2, or possibly the immediate knight bd2. I don't think I played bishop g5 at all. I'm not sure why that is such a great idea. And Vlad is completely unfazed by it anyway. He played bishop e6 at tempo. The point being that after bishop to f6, of course, black takes on c4. Well, of course, maybe it's strong. I wouldn't be entirely surprised if gf6 is also a legal move, but this is your first port of call, because d3 is hanging. You have to take on c4 with a pawn. I'm wondering if after queen takes f6, knight bd2, white is still slightly better, but queen d3 here, yeah. Now this would be horrible for white, but dc4, queen takes f6, knight bd2. But I guess black plays a5 here, knight d4, queen e7, and claims he is at the very least fine, and maybe even slightly better.
Yeah, the structure is dangerous.
Yeah, no, if I wanted to get before him, but then I realized if I start with b4, black can probably take on b4 with any piece and then go e4, and I probably have to resign, which is regrettable.
That would be a great pity. So far, both guys seem to know what they're doing. Let's check with... that's not the fun sort of knight, but they found a new legal move on move 6.
Not exactly. Now, bishop d3 existed before. What would be interesting would be to see someone try to repeat what Grishuk did in Moscow. But that's not bishop d3. That actually is bishop e3, knight g4, bishop g5, h6, bishop c1, knight f6, and bishop d3 here. And white definitely, I mean, there is a point. Normally, you don't want to force black to play h6, but when it's connected with bishop d3, in particular, if you're trying to play knight d5 as early as possible, sometimes this pawn on h6 becomes a target for some play. And also, if you're planning to go knight g3, knight f5 later, the fact that black cannot play g7, g6 so comfortably once he castles is a useful thing. For instance, like in the position they have on the board. If we just return to their game, knight g2, bishop e7 played, castles, knight g3, with the inclusion of bishop e3, bishop g5, and back, g6 would be completely impossible here. Whereas in the game, I actually kind of expect the move to be played. I think it's a very, very natural reaction to the appearance of the knight on g3. Because yes, g6 is a bit committal, but on the other hand, you're asking a very pertinent question. What is this knight doing there if it's not landing on f5 or h5? Probably something like rook e1, knight f1, knight e3 later on, but that's so slow.
We shall see. At least Nakamura continues the trend of playing very rare lines against the knight of probably enough bishop g5, and he does not expect he can surprise Maxime there one more time.
Yeah. That's
oh, this is interesting. This is a line I've been following. And if I find it interesting, then probably you guys will be bored out of your mind by it.
No. It's curious. I was actually, when you said 1d4 and then something, I thought Anish actually is quite likely to continue playing c4 against Vishy because...
against Vishy, he's been doing that a lot, that's true.
Because perhaps somewhat unjustifiably, there is this perception that Vishy is not as rock solid against the English as he is against everything else.
No, I think that's true. He's lost a bunch of games in the candidates.
But that was, I think, one isolated tournament. That was my impression, that it was this one isolated tournament where he just had a run of really horrific opening results against the English, where he was going for very principled lines and running into good preparation. But those have been tightened up. I mean, it's Vishy we're talking about.
But he is extremely predictable. Against the English, he will play e5 after knight c3. For a while, he played knight f6, knight c6, then bishop b4. Now he switched his repertoire. If you go g3, he will play c6. If you play knight c3, he will play bishop b4. He does this every game, and he will know these lines as well as anybody. But I was a bit curious about this, because after knight d5, bishop c5, this is a line Vishy helped popularize. There were a bunch of games with this, which we've talked about on this show, e3 and queen e7 or bishop b4. But I noticed that Anish already had a game with e3, and it made a lot of sense to me. I believe it was against Grishuk, because after...
He was worse out of the opening, though. Maybe he was
I disagree strongly.
Maybe he was trying for too much, but I mean, he definitely was worse, let's say, after move 15. Whether he was worse by move 10 is arguable, but like...
Well, my computer says he had like 0-40 by move 12 and then misplayed it.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it was the same course. The idea is if black goes c6 here, then you play d4. And this is a little awkward. So knight to f6 is, I believe, what Grishuk did as well. And Anish's point is here you play b4. When I was curious why the bishop could not go here, but I believe it was a little awkward after takes. I'm not sure if you even go c5 or if you start with bishop b2. Black was running into some sort of trouble.
Here I think probably you can take, no?
Yeah, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to do this, to be perfectly frank, but it wasn't great. Maybe just a3?
Yeah, possibly a3, bishop b2, or c5, bishop b2. But c5 once again, it gives black a target. Yeah, it will get immediately undermined.
I just looked at this, but I can't remember a single thing. Looks like Vichy and Grishuk both will have some point by going knight takes d5 and not bishop d6. bc, this is the point. Now white gets the bishop, and it's gonna be quite a bishop on this long diagonal. So...
But I think Sasha didn't play knight c6. I think he played queen e7.
Yes.
Or possibly e4 and knight... No, he played e4 and knight a6, I think. This is, I think, what happened in that game.
Very possible.
Bishop b2, queen e7, and something like... Or maybe bishop... No. Bishop b2, queen e7 doesn't make any sense because knight f5 would have won. So it's probably bishop e2, queen e7, and then g4. Yeah, I think this is how it went.
Anish, once again, playing all the sharpest moves. Even though, yeah, I'm not sure.
Something along those lines, anyway.
This
and
order of moves looks a bit strange.
Yeah, possibly queen e7, bishop e2, knight a6, and g4. Yeah, because here black would just take on c5. Nobody would play queen e7 in this position. And chat is informing us that queen e7 had been played there. But Anish sort of happily repeating it, and Vichy definitely declining the invitation and playing knight c6 instead of e4. So I suspect they both also did what you've done, which is check the position Anish had in that game and came to the same conclusions you have.
No, I thought this was an interesting line for white. You have the two bishops, and
no, it does look interesting. It's also very committal, but like I think it very much. It feels like a very, very concrete position here because Vichy already castled, and I think, okay, well, this is what we should be discussing. Let's say castles, d6. You're probably expecting...
Queen takes,
yeah, I think I need to take with the queen. But yeah, here, if you play g4, we're getting some kind of... Chigorin type positions. I was about to say that. Yeah, I'm not sure if I need to take on d4 first or go bishop g4 immediately. Let's try taking and going bishop g4. But yeah, if white manages not to get severely undermined in the center, this looks very promising because the black probably at some point will have to take on f3. Bishop rook a8, d5. I take. I go to. This might lose. No, it doesn't. Sorry, bishop e2, and yeah, this is. This looks very interesting for white.
I agree. Let's see what Vichy has in store. He clearly has looked at this before.
Would be extremely surprising if he hadn't looked at this in some detail, because it is, I think, the last game Anish played in 1c4 before this tournament. So it would be a very weird sleep to completely ignore it.
All right, before we get into the intricacies of the gioco piano discussed in Wesley So Kayakin, which I'm sure you're all looking forward to, we shall have a brief look at the opening in Aronian Carlsen.
Yeah, people in chat were already telling you to get very, very excited about bishop c2, which is apparently a novelty in a very well-known position. Even I know this position, and I don't play this with either color.
First of all, I'm very, very excited that Magnus played the semi-Slav, which he does not play regularly. But after e3, he did not play the main move knight bd7, but he went with the move a6, sort of. I don't even know what this line is called. A hybrid between the a6 Slav and the semi-Slav. Vichy Anand played it in his World Championship match against Boris Gelfand 3 times, lost the third game after c5 and did not go back to it. But Levon does not feel like playing c5, where I think Your boy, no, your compatriot Andrejkin has been doing some good work holding these positions after b6. Levin plays b3. Black's general point is after a6, if you move this bishop, he will gladly take here and then play b5, bishop anywhere, c5, and reach a good version of the Queen's Gambit.
Yeah.
Accept it, or the Vienna, or whatever you want.
Yeah.
So you don't move that bishop. Therefore, white has to choose between a bunch of goofy moves. If you go queen c2, that's the other main move. Then surprisingly, c5 is supposed to be good. This queen is a bit misplaced. So the main lines are b3 and c5. b3 obviously stabilizing and preparing bishop b2. When bishop b4 looks funny, but it's a well-known idea also from the Catalan that you spend half a tempo luring this bishop into d2, because after bishop b2 I think something bad happens, like knight e4 followed by queen a5. Black wins a pawn.
I'm not sure it's that horrible. It's just that white. I think you can probably go for this, yeah, because probably even the queens come off next move.
Or queen b2.
Yeah, queen b2 is even who knows what's stronger there. Both moves look quite good. Yeah, people are claiming what I drink is vodka. I wish.
Sure, we can get you some vodka.
Yeah, not a vodka drinker. Very much on the record as not a vodka drinker.
Then why do you wish what you're drinking was vodka?
It would show some, a certain freedom of spirit, which I can't claim any. You caught me there.
I'm just curious. Anyway, after bishop d3, castles, queen e7 was played. The other main line, as far as I know, and I know very far, is bishop to d6 in this position, voluntarily moving the bishop away. One thing you should try to avoid is blunder knight takes d5 tricks. Is this a threat? If you play this, I think we can take. And
yeah, that looks very strong.
We are winning a pawn.
Yeah.
Therefore, queen e7 defending this bishop, or bishop d6 removing it, have to be done.
Queen e7, yeah, and Lev surprises everybody by playing bishop c2. Not a move you necessarily understand at the first glance.
Looks like a typo. You play queen c2,
Yeah.
but sometimes you get confused with all the different ladders, and instead the bishop went there. The main moves in this position are queen c2 and queen e1, I believe, is played sometimes, threatening knight d5 again, or introducing that idea at least. Also keeping an eye on the e4 break.
Yeah, and then somehow the knight lands on e5 occasionally. Yeah, black goes.
Some lines like
Yeah. I was trying to
five,
think.
knight
Yeah,
e5
I
or
think this is
something along those
the
lines.
line I vaguely remember. Takes knight d7 f4, and it gets messy. Yeah, but I haven't seen those in a while. It was at one point. I think this was very, very topical, but I don't think it is anymore.
No, I believe Navarra had a bunch of games. There was also, I can't remember details. There's also some idea to sacrifice a pawn with a3, bishop takes, and then try to do something in the center with e4. But black is supposed to be okay there, as in most mainline openings. As for bishop c2, I don't know what he wants. It's too deep for me.
Yeah, I tried to
Shuffle
figure
the
out.
knight around? What's the point?
I think maybe he is trying to sidestep a fork with e5, e4, but you never ignore e5 in these structures.
No.
There is never a case for allowing black to get this pawn from e6 to e4.
And I'm reading in the chat something that will please you greatly. Maxim Matlakov, your second training partner, Padawan, is the new European champion.
Yeah, a few interesting stories there. There was it ended in a tie for first to third with two players from St. Petersburg, Maxim on 8.5, and Vladimir Fedoseev catching up with him by beating another Russian, Dmitry Yakovenko, in the last round. But the biggest potential story of the tournament was Bado Jababa, who is the third player in that tie, started by winning his first game and then losing 2 in a row in rounds 2 and 3, and then went on a bit of a rampage, winning his next 7 games and actually coming very, very close to winning his last round game against Maxim as well. And that would have been really a story to behold, to win a tournament outright after starting with 1 out of 3. Almost happened. Yeah, and very happy for Badur as well. He is a tremendously exciting player. One of the more exciting players playing high level chess today.
So how did it finish? Matlakov, Jobava, and Fedoseev shared first, and
Yeah.
Matlakov had the best tiebreak.
Apparently had the best tiebreak. I was trying to look that up frantically before we started this stream, but couldn't find any info there.
We'll revisit that topic. Let's, continue our tour a little bit. This position after knight g3. Maxim then played g6, went bishop e6,
Yeah.
and Hikaru jumped.
Here, arguably, it's better for white that the pawn is on h7, because if black takes twice, you can take on h7 and win it back. So everything I was saying is slightly incorrect. On the other hand, the reaction Maxim went for would have been impossible with the pawn on h6. So it's all, it's different balances need to be figured out here. Maxim, after some thought, took with the bishop, which is what they normally do. You try to get rid of that bishop. If something lands on d5, you generally keep the knight and trade the bishop off. And then he played g6, the move I mentioned, because it's extremely logical against the knight on g3. Hikaru played c4, he's still playing very fast. They both are playing reasonably fast, but Maxim is now thinking, because black's generally main plan in these types of positions, there are two, and they both are connected with moving the knight away from f6. Yeah, exactly. And Jan expertly has already drawn everything I wanted to say there on your screen, although those arrows perhaps are slightly difficult to read. Knight goes somewhere, and black tries to both play f7, f5, and in particular, if allowed, he wants to trade off the dark square bishops via bishop g5. But playing something like knight e8 or knight d7 is slightly awkward here, I feel, because you probably will be met by bishop h6 followed by queen d2. Bishop g5 will be stopped. Here you can play f5, but I'm not sure how great that is. Not that bad, to be honest. Definitely not knight fd7, because then it would get awkward. You don't want to play rook e8 the rook needs to stay on f8. Having to play rook e8 here would be a very large disadvantage for black. But knight e8 is definitely playable, and I have a feeling Maxim is now very seriously considering it. A normal move would be knight bd7. You don't need to do it immediately. But once again, here maybe white can play bishop h6, and you will have to adjust, although bishop f8 later in the game is not horrible.
What is white's typical plan in such a position?
Well, ideally you want to play for b4 and c5 and break something open on the queen side. Or occasionally, if you feel you will be fast enough, you can try playing f4. But f4, I think you need much better pieces for that, and in particular the knight on g3 is a bit pointless. F4, f5 is almost never a great idea, and f4 with the view of taking on e5 just accelerates black's counterplay in general. So I think it's probably something queenside related. Like you try to play something along the lines of bishop b3, f3, queen d2, b4, rook to c1, and then try pushing c5. Black is reasonably well equipped for that, though. You can play a5, b6, and you have a lot of stuff controlling the c5 square.
That's what I was wondering, if white is gonna play on the queen side, if this makes sense to just stop b4 in its tracks.
Yeah. a5 knight a6 is a5 with knight a6 is not a bad plan at all. Yeah, I agree with you there.
Problem is, I'm not sure how serious is this, but yeah, first of all, rook e8 I'm not thrilled about, and here we're also lagging behind a little in development.
Although I have to say that if Hikaru really badly wanted to play bishop h6, he had the option on the previous move, so perhaps MVL is not that bothered by that idea, because it also appears as if Hikaru is in no hurry to put the bishop there.
We shall see. In general, a scenario we've seen a lot. Maxim might be the first to be out of book, but he does know his book on the structure, so even though he might not know theory, he normally is quite comfortable.
I don't think there is much theory here, though. Bishop d3 is very offbeat, and I think here it is actually much more a battle of ideas than it is a battle of knowledge.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, perfectly fine with both of them. They both feel very at home in the structures. They both play this opening with two colors. And yeah, we've just seen Hikaru play something reasonably similar to this in terms of structure, at least from a certain moment on in his game against Magnus Carlsen in the previous round. Yeah. It didn't start as an Eidorf, but it became, well, it started as an Eidorf, then became a dragon, then became very Neidorfy again.
It's a chameleon.
And Vlad does take eventually, not in the position we were discussing, but he does eventually take with the G pawn, and has a minute and 37, which in his case, you know what that means. In most people's cases, this means this is still very much book, but in
everybody's case here. If you blitz out GF6, you've looked at this before.
Yeah, I also don't really quite understand why. Can we?
We've seen this. He
knight b2 was sort of expected.
Fair enough. Takes.
But why do you take with the pawn on f6?
He doesn't want Fabiano to take this pawn, but f2 is hanging, so it's not winning material.
Also, rook e8, bishop d6 immediately. Well, bishop 2 is more ambitious, but there are two ways to win this pawn back very comfortably. So it wasn't about losing the pawn. Also, before bishop takes b4 is the trick is still very much alive. I guess white castles first, probably creating the threat of capture on e5 finally. Black goes something like rook e8, and now you play b4. And I guess he wasn't particularly happy with this structure, which I can sort of understand. These structures are white does gain a lot of space on the queen side, and also your bishop, if it needs to go to d6, it kind of gets in the way of your own counterplay.
So very directly, if you push b5 here, you have to be careful not to.
b5 I'm not so sure about, because
where do you go?
I thought knight d8, knight e6 is the most promising in terms of structure, but here maybe d4 is quite strong, or rook fe1. If I want to be more conservative, knight e7, knight g6, but then once it lands on g6, white just plays g3 and it has to look for. I can have knight d5.
Think about taking this pawn at least.
Knight g6, knight g6. Queen e4 probably is the move here. You cannot allow knight d5 at all. I think you have to stop it, because knight d5 is just a very threatening idea. Maybe c6.
Oh no, I like white's position here, but yeah, this is coming. You're saying.
Yeah, I would very much like to land it there, and I think if it does land there, black will not have too many issues. But yeah, I think it's reasonably obvious by the speed with which all this appeared that Fabi was actually aiming for this.
Sure.
And GF6 had thrown him for a loop a little bit, because he is now thinking quite seriously about his options. Not that you're generally unhappy to see black take with the pawn on f6 in these positions, but it does make one source of your typical play here with white, which is putting a lot of pressure on the e5 pawn and trying to get black somewhat tangled up protecting it. This now is no longer on the agenda. The e5 pawn is extremely solid. What he would now like to do is to play something like knight h4, g4, and knight f5, but your king is still on e1. So I think we can safely assume there will never be enough time for that, especially with the d file already open.
Yeah, strange position. It's risky strategically for black, but if white doesn't manage to establish a knight here or here.
Yeah, black goes, I think, rook a d8, rook fe8. The bishop might get moved over to g7, and black plays f6, f5 at some point. And yeah, sort of, not exactly, but a return to Vlad's Sveshnikov roots. He used to play a lot of Sveshnikov in his
golden 90s
younger years. Yeah,
feels like I was gonna say a different decade, but it's even a different century when they had all these Sveshnikov discussions. Leko, Kramnik, Vishy got involved. Yeah, you have to one-up me there. It's a different. No, I think Millennium is the highest we can go.
Yeah. And just briefly, in Vish's game, we both sort of automatically assumed you take with the queen on d6. I think you kind of agreed with me there, and I was fairly sure you have to take with the queen. Vishy disagrees completely, and he's taking.
Why isn't he worse? Bishops. We have bishops.
I'm not sure. I feel like I would like to have this position with white. On the other hand, the bishop on b2 is rather efficiently contained right now. I guess black's plan is something like b6, queen c7. The bishop probably gets developed to f5, not b7. And if you play d3, you aren't really opening anything. And if you play d4, your pawn on c4, as always in this is now... Somehow it feels more like an IMSA than it feels like an English opening, although I kind of struggle to name an IMSA line in which you get this exact structure, but there will be some play against the c4 pawn. And in particular, it's just very difficult, I think, for white to shift this pawn from e5. If you include e4 knight d2, white is immediately much better. But the pawn will just stay on e5. Black will put the queen on c7 and say that sort of this is as far as you get, sir. And this is why I wanted to play b6 as early as possible, so that this doesn't happen. This is why I mentioned b6 as one of the first moves that black makes in this structure. Or at least I would very seriously consider playing it as early as possible.
Yeah, because if I get this,
then
some I'm in great shape.
Yeah,
I
some
mean,
diagonals.
This is the dream.
Yeah, these positions you feel like you've almost won, which is somewhat unfair. But white's advantage here in general is very, very large.
Yes.
So this is something that black needs to be working very diligently against.
If you go b6, can't I take? Very
So
primitive.
I'm just not in time, yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
No, here I'm definitely not in time. Can we, yeah, after d4, so my options are queen c7, c5 we dislike.
I would expect to move like bishop g4 or bishop f5 maybe.
But once again, c5 is a
Like
move there.
much.
But then we can take on d4, yeah, and that's very different.
Here's something, yeah.
Yeah, because c takes d6 is not a tempo, and black has a move to spend on something. Yeah, I think you're correct. Sometimes bishop f5 and bishop g4.
And one always has to calculate all these tricks.
I feel like bishop f5 is actually more natural because I don't think we particularly want to play e4. Although maybe if you play bishop g4. Yeah, trading one of those bishops off might not be a horrible idea. Although I'm very wary of lengthening the potential diagonal for the b2 bishop. But yeah, if you follow it with d6, d5, it might be decent. Plus, of course, it has to be mentioned that Vishy is doing this very fast, so...
Yeah, he clearly had a look at this, but...
Yeah, it's unlikely he will be horribly surprised by d2, d4 here.
My ignorant self, if I could get this position out of the opening with white, have the two bishops and a healthy structure, I'd be quite happy. Not saying white is necessarily better, but it feels like, yeah, white is something to work with at the very least.
Yeah. And MVL does play knight e8, a move we discussed at some length.
Alright, we can't
postpone
duck this game forever.
But this, I think, is game... there's actually something we can say definitively.